Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime as Liverpool head into an absolutely massive game on Thursday night. It's a 8:15 kickoff. It's at Anfield and it is against Thomas Tuchel's revitalised Chelsea side in what is a pretty big six-pointer in the fight for a top four space come the end of the season. And Liverpool have had to recently shift their focus towards the top four. Of course, it's no longer about retaining the title. That dream is over the hill and far away, and it is much more now about getting that Champions League qualification so we can, reset essentially for next season. And so this is the first game that kind of really represents a kind of barometer for that. It's the first time we're coming up against a side that we really feel like we're in the thick of the battle with. You had, of course, the games against Spurs and West Ham, who were both kind of in the mix. Of course, you'd expect Spurs to be in there, but they're fallen away a little bit. You wouldn't expect West Ham to be there, but they're doing pretty well. But that was back when Liverpool still had an outside chance of the title. Liverpool are now in a position where this game is all about getting one over your rivals in the league table. And as a result, I think it's set up pretty nicely because it's the exact same situation for Chelsea as well, and therefore a draw doesn't really suit either team. And if there's one thing that has sticked out amongst a lot of other things this season, it's that the top six clashes in the Premier League have been a bit naff, for want of a better word. None of them have been particularly entertaining. They're relatively low scoring. They're often low on incidents and action, and they tend to end in draws because both teams approach them a little bit like you would a cup semi-final or a cup final, where you're so concerned about not losing that you don't want to take the risks that are necessary to win a game at this level. And this game could potentially fall into that trap as well. Of course, neither team will want to lose this. That would represent a huge blow in the fight for one of those coveted top four spaces. But simultaneously, neither team is in the position that maybe Man United are in, or to a lesser extent Leicester, where a draw kind of suits them. It doesn't allow the other team to gain any ground on you and just keeps you in a relatively stable position. Liverpool and Chelsea, I think we're 1 point behind them after the weekend's results, are both in a position where they really need a win, not just for the points as well, but also to make that statement. If Liverpool get the win, they go above Chelsea. I believe they get back into the top four. Of course, West Ham are still a bit of a stumbling block there as well, but you'd expect them to fall away more than you'd expect someone like Chelsea or Manchester United to fall away. I don't think any Liverpool fan is as worried about West Ham as they are worried about other teams taking that top four spot. So to actually get that psychological blow of pushing in front of Chelsea, making them become part of the chasing pack, trying to catch up with us, and also to establish that we're the better footballing side. That is what a football match is all about. And therefore, this game is very, very finely poised and I think set up to be a lot more entertaining than most top six games have been this season. And it's also a big one for Liverpool because, of course, we've lost quite a few games on the spin at home recently. We managed to stop the rot with an away win against Sheffield United at the weekend, but at Anfield it really hasn't been going for us lately, and that is not ideal because you want your home ground to be a fortress. You want teams to be coming to Anfield already beaten, and there was a time not too long ago when that was the case, especially when fans were in the ground as well, and we had that long unbeaten record at home. Teams would come to Anfield and bite your hand off for even a chance at a point, let alone a win, and that kind of aura of invincibility has faded away a little bit. And listen, any win at Anfield would help us get a little bit closer to bringing that back, but a win over Chelsea under high pressure circumstances would kind of allow us to brush it under the rug and allow those previous losses to be treated as a blip and kind of send out a message that Liverpool at Anfield are very much back. So it's a really big game. There is a hell of a lot on the line. It should be entertaining as well, and of course Liverpool will have to absolutely die for these 3 points, and I'm sure they will. So team news going into the game. We had some good news in the press conference today with Jurgen Klopp confirming that Jota's illness is subsiding now. He said he was in training afterwards, not necessarily full training, but you'd expect that to be that to have kind of subsided by now, and he'll be back into the real mix of things. Fabinho as well is getting involved, so both of them are in contention for this game after missing out at the weekend. Obviously, we kind of knew Fabinho wasn't going to be quite ready, and Jota has that illness that keeps him out at the last minute. But I think both of them are definitely players that you'd want for this game. It's a huge boost for us to have them back. Whether or not they start or they're on the bench, Jurgen Klopp was very tight-lipped about. He said it was because they hadn't necessarily made a decision yet, and that wouldn't surprise me given the quick turnaround between this and the Sheffield game. The decision is something that could be made tomorrow afternoon, in fact, based on how the players are looking in warm-up sessions before the actual game itself. Although, to be honest, I think it's also a little bit of media trickery. He is, of course, not going to say for sure whether those players are going to start, but it's certainly a boost for Liverpool going into a massive game that we have these two key players back. Alisson is also back in training after compassionate leave, which is nice to see. So it's looking like he'll be back into contention for this game, which is another good boost for Liverpool as well. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up then, I think Alisson will take his role between the sticks back off of Adrian after the weekend's game. In front of him, I think we stick with Kabak and Phillips as the centre-half pairing. And to me, this is regardless of Fabinho's availability. I think we all know that even though Fabinho has been a fantastic centre-half, one of the best in the league while he's been playing there, he has missed in midfield as well. And as much as it's great to have Fabinho there, the fact that it has kind of led to him picking up more injuries because we have to rely on him on a more regular basis. Once he's in, you don't want to take him out, you don't want to rest him, and that's the thing with centre-half pairings. You can't really rotate like you would in midfield, and that's why Henderson and Fabinho have picked up injuries there that they maybe wouldn't have picked up if they'd been in midfield playing, 4/5 of the games rather than 100% of the games where they're available. So I think with that in mind, instead of chopping and changing, I'd actually quite like to see us just stick with the back line that we've got at the moment. It's also interesting that Kabak and Phillips is the first time in a while that we've actually started two centre-halves in that position. So there's maybe a reason there why you might just want to leave them in that area. And then also, if you can get Fabinho back in the side, there's a lot to be said for his ability in terms of screening the back line as well. He can actually do a lot for the centre-half pairing from his position in midfield. His positional sense is fantastic. The way he can sweep things up, the way he can read danger, good in the air as well. And as a result, that means that he may be more of an asset to the defence sitting in front of them than actually forming part of the centre-half pairing. And I think if you did have Fabinho in front of Kabak and Phillips, that would be a huge bonus for them as well. So I think we stick with them. We just try and have a consistent centre-half pairing for as long as we possibly can. And then either side of them, I think we stick with the usual fullbacks as well, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson. And then I think going into the midfield, if he's fit, and I'm hoping that he is, the signs seem to be there that he will be available, I think Fabinho will slot in as the defensive midfielder. Jurgen Klopp spoke about how in his press conference, as much as Fabinho's been good at centre-half, there are games, not all games, but certainly some matches and certain dynamics of games where you can see that Fabinho would be so useful for us in midfield. The way he plays both defensively and offensively, the way in which he recycles the ball, tackles well, doesn't just win the ball, but wins it and keeps it moving, gets it into the right areas, and his passing range is fantastic from the centre of the park in that deep line playmaker role as well. So I think particularly in this type of game, and I'll come on to the opposition a bit more later on in the video, I think having Fabinho in midfield, also screening those two relatively young and inexperienced centre-halves, would be a huge asset for us. And then I think in front of him, Gini Wijnaldum keeps his place a little bit further forward this time. We know that in that number 8 role at home in Big Six games, he has the potential to really turn up. We've seen it before, so hopefully we see it again on Thursday night. And then I think competing the midfield trio is going to be Curtis Jones. Now, that does mean I'm leaving Thiago out. That wouldn't, I think, be a huge surprise because we've seen Jurgen do it before. Leicester away, he actually started Milner over Thiago. Again, a kind of horses for courses thing, I think. I think he assessed the situation and thought that away from home against a top 4 rival, maybe Thiago wasn't the right player in the midfield, or maybe just, he wouldn't have complemented the other two players as well. And I think if you bring Fabinho back in, someone's going to have to miss out, whether it's Gini, whether it's Curtis Jones, whether it's Thiago. And I just think, Gini is so reliable, especially in these games. He's worked the system for years. It's looking like he's on the way out as well, so you may as well give him a few of these last hurrahs. And then Curtis Jones has been playing so well and was utterly brilliant in the revitalised system that we played against Sheffield United, where he played further forward, sometimes merging with the front line. If you looked at it, sometimes it was set up like a 3-2-5 with Thiago and Gini Wijnaldum as the two midfielders, and then Jones forming that kind of flat 5 of attackers along with Robertson to his left, and then the usual front 3 spread out along to his right. And so I think if we want to deploy anything like that, and listen, again, it'll be horses for courses, I think there's no saying that we will treat Chelsea the same way that we did Sheffield United. But if we ever drop into that shape, I think maybe Thiago and Gini is a bit too lightweight for this game, you know, especially if Chelsea are going to try and come at us a bit more. Whereas Fabinho and Gini Wijnaldum is a much better balance there. I think you've got a bit more height, a bit more physicality, the tackling ability of Fabinho in there as well. So listen, I think Thiago will have a role to play in this game. I still wouldn't be surprised if he starts, but I would love to see Fabinho brought back into that midfield, and someone has to give way. And I think it would be really harsh. It's still harsh on Thiago, but even harsher to take out Gini and Jones. And also looking at it from a tactical perspective, I think they suit this game. And then in front of that midfield, I think we'll see a little bit of change as well. Salah, I reckon, will keep his place. I'm expecting Mane to be moved centrally, and then Diogo Jota to be brought in to the front three, playing on the left side. And that segues quite nicely into talking about Chelsea and how I think this game is going to go. Because before I get into why I think Jota's going to play over Firmino, I think it's worth noting that this is the first really big game that Chelsea have had under Tuchel. Certainly in the league, they did have the game against Atletico, and that was a tough match for them, and one they came away with an impressive 1-0 win. But domestically, this is massive, and also it feels like there's more riding on it because the Champions League, once you get into the knockouts, it is almost a little bit of a free hit. Unless you're one of the really big teams, it is just a matter of the further you go, the better. Whereas getting top four, actually getting into the initial stages of the Champions League, is absolutely huge, and failure becomes, you know, a much bigger deal. And therefore, I think this is probably his biggest game since he arrived. And so I think he'll actually want to stamp his identity a little bit, and that will almost come at a cost to Chelsea's approach to this game. They could look to sit off a little bit more, soak up pressure, and let Liverpool come onto them, as we've seen teams do relatively effectively against us. But I think what he might actually look to do is commit to his style wholeheartedly, and that does mean possession, playing high up the pitch, high lines, looking to, you know, pass the ball very, very quickly, very efficiently, moving around a lot. And listen, that's still a great way to play football, and if implemented perfectly, would beat anyone, including Liverpool, on most days. But with Chelsea still finding their way, I think he doesn't want to send out the mixed messages of changing his approach for one game, because, you know, partially the players are still getting used to his initial style, and also you don't want to give the impression that as good as that style is, it isn't good enough to beat a team like Liverpool. He wants them going in and believing that the Tuchel way is the way to go, and if you change your mind when you come up against a good side, then that's not the right message to send out. So I think Chelsea will stick to their guns, but as a result, I think that will give Liverpool some really good opportunities to hurt them, and that is why I think we will go with Diogo Jota, because I'm looking back at games like particularly the Atalanta one, where Jota bags that fantastic hat-trick. Liverpool are lethal on the counter-attack, score 5 goals without reply, and just rip Atalanta to shreds. Atalanta approach that game, you know, positively. They look to keep the ball, play a high line, have possession, pass their way through Liverpool's lines, and they tried it, but Liverpool were just so on it and had such a clear idea of how to beat them at their own game that we ended up coming out resounding winners. So, and I think Jota was very key to that as well. You know, the speed of having not just Mane or Salah, both of them were fantastic on the break and brilliant finishers, but Jota in there as well, a player who is so unafraid of finishing. And listen, I love Firmino. I still think he's a fantastic footballer, and he does have things to offer Liverpool. And it feels harsh to take him out of the side for this game, you know, especially after playing against Sheffield United and having a decent game. The goal obviously isn't given to him in the end, but he has a hand in both of them. He's involved. He shows what he does have to offer Liverpool, aside from obviously wayward finishing at the moment. But in this game, you want players who it's one chance, one goal, because that strikes so much fear into the opposition as well. And Jota, listen, he probably won't be 100% sharp, so it is a risk to throw him in. But we saw earlier on in his Liverpool career that all he needed was that one chance. All he needed was 20 minutes on the pitch and he could get the winning goal. So I think he might be one of those players that you can throw in from the start in cold, and he will just immediately, he'll get it like that. He loves to shoot early. He loves to just get into the box and take chances. He's brilliant in terms of his shot placement as well. And I think him coming back now could be the real difference maker in this game. It could be the difference between this being a bit of a slog and very 50-50, and me, myself, not being entirely assured of whether or not Liverpool have got what it takes to beat Chelsea. It kind of flips my opinion round, and I think if we've got him on the pitch, that psychological boost for everyone else as well could allow Liverpool to get over the line. And also, I think given the way we're expecting Chelsea to play, I'd quite like to see us treat them like teams have treated us, sit back a little bit, soak it up. You imagine Nat Phillips and Kabak will be a little bit more comfortable if they've got more players around them, if there's less of a gap between them and the goalie, less of a gap between them and the midfield players, and they're mainly focused on defending their 18-yard box and the small areas around that, rather than an entire half of the pitch. So I think it makes sense for Liverpool to actually let Chelsea play how they want to play, let Tuchel impose his ideas on that squad, let them come at us a bit and say, well, listen, you're going to have to deal with the lads that we've got on the counter-attack. We did a bit of a similar thing against RB Leipzig, and it was very, very effective, and I'd love to see us do a similar thing on Thursday night. So with that in mind, I'm quite optimistic about this game, and it of course all depends on how they set up. If Chelsea set up really defensively and we look to keep the ball a lot and go at them, then it changes the dynamic and would probably change my expectations of how the match might go. But given how I think it's going to go, with Chelsea looking to attack, to keep the ball, us looking to sit off and hit them on the break, I think we've got a serious chance to beat them, go above them in the table, and shove a real rocket up our challenge for one of those top 4 places. So that is all for today's video. Let me know how you guys are feeling about the match tomorrow down in the comments below. Apart from that, don't forget to hit that like button down there as well if you enjoyed the video. Hit that subscribe button there if you are new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back tomorrow evening after we've hopefully leapfrogged Chelsea in the table. Until then, bye for now.